Years ago, a doctor told my dad to quit drinking coffee. So, my parents, who were lifelong coffee drinkers and doctor's orders followers, switched to decaf, which was a big problem for me whenever I spent the night at their house. Every morning, as soon as my feet hit the floor, I head to the coffee pot. And I'm a gulper, not a sipper. 2 cups, black and fully caffeinated, please. I don't remember the circumstances that prompted this medical recommendation, but today we are going to look at the current evidence and find out if coffee is good or bad for your health. Fingers crossed.
Healthy isn't just what you do, it's who you become. I'm Dr. Vicki, and this is Healthy Looks Great on You, a lifestyle medicine podcast to help you reclaim your energy, your focus, and your well-being. Life tested, doctor approved.
2/3 of Americans are regular coffee drinkers according to the National Coffee Association. I wonder if they take members. I guess I'm below average though because 3 cups is the norm. But if you watched my husband heap the grounds in the basket, well, my 2 cups might be your 3 cups, so there's that. The effects of coffee drinking aren't just physical, they're social too. And that's not a new phenomenon either. Coffee shops date back to the 17th century and have played an important role in shaping politics, society, and even revolutions. But that's not something we cover in many medical school. But before we answer the question, is coffee good for you? Let's go to mini medical school and study a little chemistry and physiology. Coffee contains over 1,000 compounds, and I'm going to list them very quickly, but you need to memorize every single one of them. Just kidding. That might be the equivalent of the volume of memorization you'd have to do in real medical school, but that's not nearly as much fun. Trust me. But here's the deal. Some of those compounds are good for you and others not so much. When you think about coffee, you probably think about caffeine. But there are also chlorogenic acids and trigonelline, which both have health benefits. Chlorogenic acids are anti-inflammatory and can help with blood sugar spikes. Trigonelline contributes to the flavor of coffee but also breaks down to form niacin, which is actually vitamin B3. Then there's the bad stuff like mycotoxins, which comes from mold that can grow on improperly stored beans, as well as small amounts of pesticides, heavy metals, and plastics. But caffeine is the star of the show. Star, not Starbucks. But that reminds me, as we explore the benefits and side effects of drinking coffee, keep in mind that that doesn't include whatever else you may be putting in it. Depending on your choice of milk, a caramel macchiato from Starbucks contains 250 calories, plus about 7 grams of fat, and at least half of that is saturated fat, which is not the good kind, 25 milligrams of cholesterol, 150 milligrams of sodium, and the total carbohydrate count is 35 grams, and 33 of that is just sugars. But you do get 10 grams of protein. Now, I learned to drink my coffee black back in college. I went to university and started my pre-med studies, and I was well on the road to a freshman 15 as well. So I called and lamented to my wise mother, and she advised me to drink my coffee black. And listen, I was motivated. 15 pounds on this 5-foot body is a lot. So I ditched the creamer and the sugar and learned to love a steaming cup of Java sans calories. Plus, I needed it to study. Caffeine is not only the most well-known compound, but also the one with the most impact. It stimulates the central nervous system. And what it does is it blocks a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And every cell in your body has adenosine. While you're awake, it builds up. And that acts as a signal to your brain that you need to sleep so that your body can clear this buildup. There is a lot of work that goes on while you're sleeping. Adenosine is also the A in ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. That probably sounds familiar if you ever had to memorize the Krebs cycle. You know, I can't really say that knowing the Krebs cycle ever helped me treat a patient, but a solid understanding of science certainly did. ATP is the energy molecule. Essentially, it powers the body for everything: muscles, nerves, making DNA. You also might have heard of adenosine if you've ever been treated for a high heart rate or had a heart scan or a stress test. It increases blood flow to the heart and helps slow down the rate. Okay, before I nerd out on medicine anymore, back to the black liquid of life. Coffee contains caffeine, and caffeine looks like adenosine. So when you sip, or in my case, gulp from your mug, that caffeine blocks the receptor in your brain to adenosine. Now, normally adenosine triggers tiredness, but caffeine is an imposter. And when it sits in that receptor, it blocks adenosine from latching on and firing off that signal that you're tired. So instead, you're wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, which is a good thing in the morning, but obviously not at bedtime. The ability for caffeine to keep you awake by blocking the signal that makes you tired is highly individual. CYP1A2 is an enzyme that metabolizes caffeine. Fast metabolizers and slow metabolizers have genuinely different health outcomes from coffee. So what is the answer to the original question, is coffee good or bad for you? Well, since I'm an optimist, let's start with the good. Not only is coffee an effective eye-opener, but it also affects mood. You've probably seen those coffee mugs that say, "Don't even talk to me until I've reached a certain level of caffeination." Coffee increases alertness and it helps you focus. It can even speed up your reaction time, which is why some cars show a little steaming cup on the instrument panel if the car thinks you need a break from driving. Drinking coffee can improve your memory, and it helps sustain the GPA of many college and medical students. But here's the really important news. Coffee drinkers have a lower risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. I see a hand raised in the back. What's your question? Oh, you wanted to tell me about your grandmother who regularly drank coffee and still got Alzheimer's. Yeah, it's complicated. When it comes to diagnoses and health conditions, there's rarely one thing you can pin it on. We call that multifactorial, and it's important to remember that you can do everything right and still get sick. It's also important to distinguish between large data from cohorts versus anecdotal cases. Sometimes when we do big medical studies, we find trends that we would have never detected by just looking at our friends and family and neighbors. But drinking coffee is associated with a lower risk of heart failure and stroke. Seems to be beneficial for the liver too, lowering the risk of fatty liver disease and cirrhosis. And of course, it gets things moving in your bowels, and that's why you gotta go after your morning cup of joe. See, coffee stimulates the peristalsis, partly through its effect on hormones like gastrin and cholecystokinin. Peristalsis is that wave that makes your bowels move. And coffee contains antioxidants too, and that decreases inflammation in the body. And we don't understand all the complexities, but it's associated with lower risk of certain types of cancer. Coffee drinkers have a lower risk of metabolic syndrome, chronic kidney disease, and type 2 diabetes, because some of the compounds in coffee actually help with glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. Now, of course, dumping teaspoons full of sugar or sweetened creamer into your cup is really not a good plan. Also, if you already have type 2 diabetes, be mindful that caffeine can spike your blood sugar. Coffee drinking is linked to less gallstones and kidney stones. And speaking of stones, if you're having a rocky day, it improves mood and is associated with a lower risk of depression. I'm starting to feel really good about my coffee drinking habit. My consumption is in the range that is linked to a lower risk of premature death. Longevity is extended 17% in moderate coffee drinkers, according to the British Medical Journal. But not everything in that 1,000 compound list is working in your favor. Too much of a good thing can make you feel jittery and shaky and irritable and cause your heart to race, and it can pump up your blood pressure. Coffee has some risk, and they are mostly due to caffeine. Not to mention, it can increase the acid in your stomach and make reflux worse. Unless you limit your coffee to mornings, it can also interfere with sleep. Actually, even if you limit it to mornings, it can affect your sleep depending on how you metabolize it. And since it's a diuretic, you'll be making more trips to the bathroom. Women who drink more than 5 cups a day tend to have a lower bone density. So keep your intake under about 400 milligrams a day. Unless you're pregnant, then the limit is 200 milligrams a day, which is about 2 cups. And I don't know if my dad was told to cut back on caffeine or eliminate it altogether, but they switched to decaf, which is not a bad thing. Decaf coffee retains polyphenols, antioxidants, and the health benefits. Plus, it is easier on your stomach, but probably not your morning mood. If you're a regular coffee drinker, you probably know that withdrawal can cause a severe headache. Years ago, I traveled south of the border to help build houses in an impoverished community. We slept in a bunk room on one side of the compound where we stayed, and the men slept on the other side where the kitchen was located, and therefore the coffee pot. As a naturally early riser who was 2 time zones away from home, I woke up at a ridiculous hour, long before the pots were brewing. Fortunately, I had a sleeve of instant crystals in my toiletries bag. Never leave home without it. I opened the top of a room temperature bottle of water and poured in the crystals. And while I was shaking it, one of the ladies on the top bunk opened one eye and said, "You have a problem, don't you?" Well, I guess that depends on your perspective. If drinking coffee lowers my risk for type 2 diabetes, liver disease, kidney stones, gallstones, certain types of cancer, and dementia, and increases my focus, memory, mood, and longevity, then I'm not a glass half empty kind of person. I'm a fill my cup to the brim for another gulp. And no matter which way the pendulum swings, I'm sticking to my routine. If you ask me, coffee is good for your health, and healthy looks great on you. If you learned something today, or if this just made you feel better about your morning cup, I'd love it if you'd take 30 seconds to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It genuinely helps more people find the show, and I read every single one. Just search for Healthy Looks Great on You on Apple Podcast and hit the subscribe button and scroll down to leave a rating and a review. It means the world to me. Now, go fill your cup.
The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered to be a substitute for medical advice. You should continue to follow up with your physician or healthcare provider and take medication as prescribed. Though the information in this podcast is evidence-based, new research may develop and recommendations may change.